In Monster Hunter World, there are many aspects to consider when taking on a hunt. The target, your weapon, these are all important, but hunters who want optimal performance need to consider the builds they use via the armor and gear they wear. I'm Darcblade, and here are even more builds that I use for the Greatsword. The skills that you gain from armor and even some weapons can help shape your hunter into specialized hunting machines. With the Greatsword, the weapon excels at dealing massive damage to a monster, and while slow, each hit from the Greatsword is fairly substantial. The builds I use aim to capitalize on this, ensuring maximum DPS or allowing a hunter some extra survivability. Also, before we get into the video, these builds are aimed at endgame content that Monster Hunter World has to offer. So the first build I use is the ELEMENTLESS version 2.0 build. This build is a DPS focused build making use of peak performance, and as such it has some health regen options available to it. So for this build you need the Kaiser Crown Gamma, Nergigante Male Gamma, Draken Vambrace's Alpha, Nergigante Coil Gamma, and the Nergigante Greaves Gamma. I'm also using a Focus Charm 2, and for my weapon I'm using the Wyvern Ignition Impact. This has an affinity increase augmentation on it, as well as a health regen augmentation. As for the jewels, you have a fair amount to play with here. Firstly, I've gone for an Elementless jewel to give us that non-elemental boost skill, as the Wyvern's Ignition is technically a Elementless weapon until you release the fire element. Afterwards, I've gone for Flawless Jewels to max out peak performance, Tenderizer Jewels to max out Weakness Exploit, a Charger Jewel to max out the Focus skill, an Attack Jewel to get attack boost to at least level 4, Expert Jewels to add some Critical Eye, and finally a Handicraft Jewel just to add a little bit of extra Handicraft, although this one is optional. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 100 health, 100 stamina, 1253 attack, which is actually higher when on a hunt thanks to peak performance, white sharpness, 50% affinity, which will actually be 100% so long as you have full stamina and are attacking a monster's weak point. You have no element, and you have a fairly high defense, but when it comes to the elements, you're strong against fire, but a little bit weak to the rest. As for the skills, you'll have the following. You have Critical Eye level 7. Critical Eye basically just increases our affinity rating. You have Attack Boost level 5. In all honesty, you only really need to go to level 4 on this to get the most out of it, as at level 4 you get the extra 5% affinity on top of the actual increase to your attack. But we had some slots to play with, so we've got Attack Boost to level 5. You have Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit increases our affinity when we attack a monster's weak point, and at level 3 is 50%. Focus level 3, Focus basically reduces the time it takes to charge up our weapon, and with the Greatsword being one of the weapons that requires charge times in between attacks, this can help reduce that time. You have Peak Performance level 3, increasing our overall attack so long as we have full health. Maximum Might level 2, again increasing our affinity so long as we have full stamina. Handicraft level 1, Handicraft basically increases the sharpness of our weapon. Agitator level 1, a byproduct of the gear but can be useful. Agitator enables the hunter to get some extra attack and affinity when a monster becomes enraged. And finally you'll have Non-Elemental Boost level 1, increasing the attack of our weapon so long as it doesn't have an element or the said element is hidden, as is the case with the Wyvern Ignition. As for set bonuses, you'll have Nergigante's Hunger, Hasten Recovery, allowing us to recover a small portion of health when we attack a monster, and this does stack with the health regen augmentation on the weapon, so potentially so long as you don't take a big hit, you can heal yourself through attacking a monster rather than having to stop sheath and take a potion. So as you can see, it is a straightforward DPS build that utilizes peak performance as well as a small amount of health regen. With this build I've gone for health regen to enable us to get that peak performance back without having to interrupt our offense when we're on a hunt. But of course, like with all the builds out there, there is room for changes to fit a hunter's personal preferences. For example, you could completely drop peak performance altogether to max out crit boost. With crit boost and the fact that this build does have 100% affinity so long as you're going for monster weak points, it means that your critical hits will deal more damage. At one point I did have crit boost as well as peak performance, and I didn't have focus on this build, but for me personally I find that focus is so useful when using the Greatsword, so I always tend to favour it now. Ultimately though, when using this build on a hunt, whether you've gone for peak performance like in this video or crit boost, you'll be taking down monsters incredibly fast. Anyway, let's move on to the next build, which is the Earplug build. Now this build again is a DPS focused build but utilises the Earplug skill. Earplugs allow us to ignore monsters' roars altogether, and whilst yes, the Greatsword can shoulder charge through monster roars, thus preventing the roar from interrupting your attack, with the Earplug skill it just gives you a little bit of extra quality of life when you're on a hunt. So for this build you need the Kaiser Crown Gamma, Damascus Male Beta, Kaiser Vambrace's Gamma, Basil Coil Beta, and the Kaiser Greaves Gamma. I'm also using the Earplugs Charm 3, and for my weapon I'm using the Empress Gallia Styx. This has an affinity increase augmentation attached to it. As for the jaws, we've gone for DPS focused ones here, a charger jaw to max out focus, tenderizer jaws to max out weakness exploit, critical jaws to max out crit boost, and attack jaws to get attack boost to at least level 4. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 100 health, 100 stamina, 994 attack, with white sharpness, 55% affinity, which is actually 100% when you're going for monster weak points, with 333 blast rating, and you'll have a decent defense, especially against fire, but you're fairly weak to water and ice. As for the skills, you have Critical Eye level 7, Earplugs level 5. At level 5, Earplugs allows you to completely ignore any monster roar, thus they won't interrupt your attack, and in all respects it leaves a monster open while it's performing the roar animation. You have Attack Boost level 4, Crit Boost level 3. As I mentioned in the previous build, Crit Boost enables our critical hits to deal more damage, and as this build does have that 100% affinity so long as you're going for monster weak points, it means that your crits will be dealing more damage. You have Weakness Exploit level 3, Focus level 3, and you'll have the Razor Sharp skill level 1. The Razor Sharp skill is normally found on the Xeno'jiiva set bonus, but it is also found on the Empress Galia sticks. This basically halves all sharpness loss. You also have the set bonus Teostra's Technique, Master's Touch, which prevents any sharpness loss when we crit a monster. And whilst yes, it may be considered a little bit overkill combining Master's Touch with Razor Sharp, this build should see next to no sharpness loss whatsoever. So there you have it. As you can see, it is a fairly straightforward, simple DPS build that utilises the earplugs. Earplugs are a little bit of an underrated skill, but after playing with a build that utilises them for a while, I tend to miss them. I would say they aren't an essential skill, but they definitely add to a build's quality of life. Of course, if you wanted to change the build out, you could completely drop the earplugs altogether for more survival or DPS orientated skills. The choice is up to you. But like I said, with earplugs and not having to worry about shoulder charging to counter a monster's roar, it means that you'll have periods during a hunt where the monster goes for its giant roar. Whilst it does it, it leaves it open for you to perform potentially a massive true charge slash. Anyway, let's move on to the next build, which is the aerial build. This build is a DPS build that focuses on aerial attacks. Currently in Monster Hunter World, the aerial greatsword is considered one of the best builds in the game, but requires a little bit of a awkward technique to pull off correctly. Basically, the greatsword, once you jump off an edge, if you're aiming in the right direction, you can charge the greatsword up, allowing your hunter to go back up in the air slightly, back onto the edge, landing that aerial hit, and then you just roll again, rinse and repeat over and over again. This build should allow you to do that, as well as be a potent DPS build whilst your feet are firmly on the ground. So for this build you'll need the Draken Armet Alpha, Draken Mel Alpha, Draken Vambraces Alpha, Nergigante Coil Gamma, and the Draken Greaves Alpha. I'm also using the Handicraft Charm 3, and for my weapon I'm using again the Wyvern's Ignition Impact with an affinity increase augmentation as well as a health regen augmentation. The health regen augmentation on this build is purely optional, and it's down to personal choice. As for the jewels, I've gone for DPS focused ones here, so again an Elementless jewel for that non-elemental boost skill, Tenderizer jewels to max out weakness exploit, an attack jewel to get attack boost to at least level 4, expert jewels for critical eye, and finally some charger jewels to add some focus to the build. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 100 health, 100 stamina, 1238 attack with a fairly sizable chunk of white sharpness. You have 40% affinity, which will be 90% when going for monster weak points, no element, with a fairly high defense, especially against dragon and thunder, but you're fairly weak to the other elements. As for the skills, you'll have critical eye level 7, attack boost level 4, crit boost level 3, weakness exploit level 3, handicraft level 3, focus level 2. It would have been nice to get this higher, but at level 2 you can still feel the effects of the reduced charge up time. You'll have airborne level 1, increasing the damage of our airborne attacks, and this is kind of essential for this build to work. You have agitator level 1, again a byproduct but can still be useful for increasing our attack and affinity when a monster becomes enraged. You have maximum might level 1 and non-elemental boost level 1. As for the set bonuses, you'll have Soul of the Dragoon, Elemental Airborne, which increases elemental airborne attacks, but it's not needed on this build as this weapon is elementless, and you'll also have Master's Touch, preventing any sharpness loss when you crit a monster. So that's the aerial DPS build I tend to use. Whilst it may not be the most optimal one out there as it does lack peak performance and doesn't quite reach that 100% affinity, it's still perfectly functional and brings down monsters quickly. The main reason I haven't got that 100% affinity is I didn't want to invest too many points in maximum might. Because you will be rolling on and off an edge, you'll be losing that full stamina bar quite often. Thus I invested skills elsewhere. Now this build also works perfectly fine if you want to keep your 2 feet on the ground, And if that is the case, there are some skills you could swap in and out. For example, you don't need the airborne skill, but this will mean that you need to swap a few pieces of armor. Nonetheless though, once you have the airborne method of attacking down, builds like this have resulted in some of the fastest speedruns in Monster Hunter World. Anyway, let's move on to the fourth and final build, which is the survivability build. This build focuses on survivability and health regen over any other aspects. It does have some DPS options, so it still can bring down monsters quite fast, but whilst using this build, you should rarely faint. So for this build, you'll need the Dragon King Eye Patch Alpha, the Valhazak Mel Gamma, Kushala Grips Gamma, Valhazak Coil Gamma, and the Valhazak Greaves Gamma. I'm also using an attack charm 3, and for my weapon, I'm using the Empress Gallia Ruin. This has a health regen augmentation attached to it. As for your jewels, I've gone for a mix of survival and DPS jewels. These include Vitality jewels to max out health boost, Medicine jewels to max out recovery up, Attack jewels to get attack boost to at least level 4, Tenderizer jewels to max out weakness exploit, a Charger jewel to max out focus, Flawless jewels to max out peak performance, and Mighty jewels to max out maximum might. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will actually be 200 health when you're on a hunt and you've taken all your various consumables. You'll have an attack of 1042, which again will be higher so long as you have full health whilst on a hunt. You'll have white sharpness, 35% affinity, which will actually be 85 when you're on hunt and you're attacking monster weak points with full stamina. You'll have a blast rating of 210, and you'll have a fairly decent defense, especially against water and ice, but you're fairly weak to fire and dragon. As for the skills, you'll have attack boost level 4, health boost level 3, health boost increases our maximum health to that potential 200. You'll have recovery up level 3, recovery up basically increases the effectiveness of healing techniques, so potions and such. You have recovery speed level 3. Recovery speed increases the rate at which our health naturally regenerates over time, so long as there is a red portion of health on the health bar. This combines with the set bonus of this build, but we'll talk about that in a minute. You have weakness exploit level 3, focus level 3, peak performance level 3, maximum might level 3, dragon attack level 1, unfortunately a byproduct of the gear, it's not needed on this build whatsoever. And you'll have hasten recovery level 1. Hasten recovery is normally the Nergigante set bonus, but it's also found on the Empress Gallia Ruin. This allows us to recover our health when attacking a monster, and it does combine with the health regen augmentation. You also have the set bonus Valhazak's Vitality, super recovery, allowing our health to recover naturally over time without any interference past the red portion of our health, basically allowing us to recover our entire health bar over time. So this combined with the recovery speed means that this build always has a heal over time effect going on with it. If we're attacking a monster, we also get the hasten recovery and health regen augmentations adding to that health regen, and the recovery up skill allowing for our healing to be enhanced. It all means that this build's health regen is the highest it possibly can be. Rarely should you have to stop in the middle of a hunt to take a potion and heal yourself. Also, if you take into account the health regen coupled with peak performance, it means that that peak performance skill should be active quite a lot of the time for a hunt, adding to this build's overall performance. So there we have it, those are even more builds that I like to use for the Greatsword. Of course, Monster Hunter World is always being updated with new monsters and gear which can potentially cause these builds to change and become even stronger, especially with Monster Hunter World Iceborne on the horizon. So when major updates happen to any of these builds, I'll be sure to release an updated video. Remember also that almost any task in Monster Hunter World can be taken on with any weapon and gear set. You don't have to use what is shown in these videos. These are just the sets that I personally like to use. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful or informative, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you even more builds that I use for the Greatsword in Monster Hunter World. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.